The first thing I heard after the cell door closed was a woman crying 3 rooms down. The second was the fluorescent light above me, buzzing like an insect trapped inside glass. At 3:07 a.m., I stood barefoot on cold concrete because the officer had taken my heels, my phone, my belt, and everything else that made me look like Claire Bennett, executive secretary, instead of Claire Bennett, suspect. I had spent 4 years arranging Adrian Vale's life down to the minute. Flights. Meetings. Names he needed to remember and names he preferred never to hear twice. Tonight, someone had used that knowledge against me. My immediate goal was simple: keep Vale security out of this building until Adrian saw me himself. The desk officer slid the phone through the opening. One call. My fingers were steady when I dialed the private number only 6 people possessed. They stopped being steady when he answered on the first ring. Vale. His voice was low, fully awake. In the background, I heard chairs move and a conversation die. Adrian never raised his voice. Rooms adjusted around him instead. It's Claire. Silence. Not confusion. Calculation. Where are you? City detention. Another silence, shorter this time. What happened? An officer watched me from behind scratched plexiglass. A red light blinked above the phone. Recorded. They arrested me for taking financial records from Vale Holdings. I heard the scrape of Adrian's chair. I'm calling Reed and security. No, the word came out sharper than I intended. Across the desk, the officer looked up. Adrian said nothing. That was worse than anger. I lowered my voice. Don't call security. Just come. Claire. One word. A warning, a question, and something almost human beneath both. I had never asked him for a personal favor. Not when my rent doubled. Not when my mother's old case files resurfaced and reminded me how quickly a system could grind an innocent woman into silence. I had learned early that needing powerful people gave them permission to decide what happened to you. Tonight, I was already inside the machine. I needed Adrian to stop his own from turning. Please, I said. Come alone. The line went quiet for half a breath. Then he answered, I'm leaving now. 41 minutes later, the corridor outside interview room 3 changed before I saw him. Officers straightened. Conversations lowered. A lieutenant who had ignored me for an hour suddenly found paperwork worth carrying. Adrian appeared in a charcoal suit, his black coat open, Daniel Reed half a step behind him. No guards. He had listened. Adrian's eyes found mine through the narrow window in the door. They moved once over my face, my wrinkled blouse, my bare feet. His expression did not change, but he removed his father's steel watch and placed it in his pocket. He only did that when anger threatened to become visible. Detective Mercer entered first and dropped a file on the table. Ms. Bennett's credentials accessed a restricted ledger at 1:42 this morning. We found the drive in her bag. Adrian did not touch the file. You searched her before documenting the evidence. Mercer's mouth tightened. You're not running this room. No, Adrian said. That's why you're still speaking. It was not a threat. It was a fact delivered without heat, which made Mercer's hand pause over the folder. He removed one page before pushing the rest across the table. Adrian noticed. So did I. When we were finally left facing each other, Adrian leaned forward. Tell me the truth. I wanted to. Instead, I looked at the camera in the corner and asked, who has authority to generate an administrative token above mine? His gaze sharpened. Why? Because I left the office before midnight. That doesn't answer me. It answers the only question that matters. The door opened behind him. An officer whispered something to Mercer, and Mercer glanced toward me too quickly. My stomach tightened. Adrian saw it. What changed? Mercer closed the file. Nothing you can fix tonight. I looked at Adrian's empty wrist. The person who framed me knew your private schedule. They knew exactly when you'd leave the office. A metallic buzz sounded in the corridor. Another officer approached carrying a transfer form. I read the destination upside down before he covered it with his hand. Wrong facility. Wrong jurisdiction. Too fast. I stood so suddenly the chair legs scraped the floor. Adrian, I said, keeping my eyes on the form, if your people find out I called you, they'll move me before dawn. Mercer looked toward the locked door. Adrian looked at me. And for the first time since I had known him, the most powerful man in the city did not look in control. Adrian's gaze moved from the transfer form to Mercer. Who authorized it? Mercer took the paper from the officer, read the signature, and went still for half a second. It's valid. That wasn't my question. Adrian's voice stayed level, but the room seemed to contract around it. Daniel stepped closer, already reaching for his phone. Adrian stopped him with one raised hand. That restraint startled me more than anger would have. He could have flooded the building with attorneys, favors, and men who owed him things. Instead, he looked at me. What do you want me to do? No one had asked me that since the handcuffs closed. Stop the transfer without making the case disappear. Daniel frowned. Claire, those goals may conflict. Then find the conflict. Mercer exhaled through his nose. There's another way. She signs a statement saying she accessed the ledger alone. I suspend the transfer request and recommend reduced charges. The words landed softly. That made them worse. A clean lie. The kind that could bury the truth while pretending to spare me. Adrian's jaw tightened. She's not signing anything. I turned toward him. That decision is mine. His eyes met mine. For one dangerous second, I expected resistance. Then he leaned back and folded his hands. Yes, he said. It is. The simple surrender of control shifted something inside me, though I refused to name it. Mercer slid the statement across the table. You walk out sooner. Whoever else is involved becomes someone else's problem. I read the first line. My name looked wrong beside the word confession. My mother had once signed a statement she did not understand because a company lawyer promised it would protect her job. It protected everyone except her. I pushed the paper back. No, Mercer's expression hardened. Then give me the password to the encrypted folder on your phone. Also no. You're making this difficult. Someone arranged my arrest, planted a drive, and filed a transfer before my attorney arrived. Difficult already happened. Adrian's eyes lowered briefly to my hands. I had curled them into fists without noticing. Who are you protecting? He asked. Someone who has never had enough power to survive being noticed by men like you. Daniel looked away. Mercer didn't. Adrian absorbed the answer without flinching. And you think I would use them? I think you would decide their safety mattered more than their consent. His face became unreadable. The silence stretched until the fluorescent buzz felt loud enough to split glass. Then Mercer opened the evidence file again. The system record is clean. Bennett's credentials entered at 1:42. The ledger was downloaded. The drive was recovered from her bag. Too clean, I said. Mercer glanced at me. What? Real work leaves hesitation. Failed access attempts. Navigation history. Whoever did this moved straight to one file, copied it, and logged out. Adrian's attention sharpened. They knew the path. And they knew my access pattern well enough to imitate it. Mercer tapped a line on the report. The transfer order references North Room funding. My pulse stumbled. My hand moved toward the empty place where my phone should have been before I stopped it. Adrian noticed. Of course he did. His father's watch remained absent from his wrist, and the pale strip of skin beneath it made him look less armored than usual. What is North Room? Mercer asked. Adrian answered too quickly. Old accounting language. I knew evasion when I heard it. Before I could press him, Daniel's phone vibrated. He read the screen, then looked at the evidence bag. The drive was logged into property at 2:51. Mercer checked the arrest report. Color drained from his face. I had been searched at 3:03. 12 minutes later. The room changed again, not with fear this time, but with proof. Daniel placed his phone on the table. Detective, explain how evidence entered your custody before your officers found it. Mercer stared at the sealed drive as if it had begun breathing. Outside, the transfer officer waited beside the locked door, form still in hand. Mercer reached for the transfer form, but Adrian placed 2 fingers on the paper before he could take it. Not hard. Not dramatic. Just enough to stop the motion. No one moves her, he said. The officer at the door glanced toward Mercer, then toward Adrian, as if deciding which authority would still matter by sunrise. Mercer's face tightened. You don't issue orders here. Then consider it a prediction. Daniel stepped between them before the room could harden further. The evidence log is compromised. The transfer request is contaminated by the same chain. Until both are reviewed, moving Ms. Bennett creates liability for this department. Mercer looked at the sealed drive, then at the officer. Cancel the transport. The man left without argument. That was how Adrian's power worked. He did not need obedience from everyone. He only needed to make disobedience more expensive than caution. I should have felt safer. Instead, I felt the walls move closer. You knew they would react like that, I said. Adrian removed his hand from the form. I knew they would protect themselves. That's not the same as protecting me. His eyes stayed on mine. No. It isn't. The answer came without defense, and that unsettled me enough to tell the truth I had been holding back. The drive was supposed to be found. Daniel stopped writing. Mercer stared at me. Adrian did not move at all. Explain, he said. A Vail security sedan followed me when I left the office. I recognized the fleet marker in the windshield. I had approved the insurance renewals myself. I didn't know whether the driver was protecting me, watching me, or waiting for me to be alone. So I drove toward a police response near Grand Avenue and made sure the officers saw the drive in my bag. Mercer's disbelief turned sharp. You engineered your own arrest? I created a record no private security team could erase quietly. The fluorescent light flickered once above us. Adrian looked at me as if 4 years of shared offices had failed to teach him who I was. You chose a cell over calling me. I chose cameras, timestamps, and witnesses. You thought my people were the greater risk. I didn't know which of them were still yours. Something changed in his face then. Not anger. Recognition, and beneath it, something wounded he refused to touch. Mercer opened the file again. There's more. He pulled out the page he had hidden earlier and turned it toward us. A payment record. One recipient was a police administrator. The source was a Vail subsidiary I knew only as a line item in quarterly reports. Why hold this back? Adrian asked. Mercer folded his arms. Because that administrator has access to evidence intake, transport orders, and internal case alerts. I entered the page into the system, then watched someone request it 6 minutes later. Someone inside your department, I said. Or someone who owns access to it. Mercer looked at Adrian. The accusation stayed unspoken. Adrian could have threatened him. Instead, he said, keep it off your network. Mercer blinked. You're telling me how to preserve evidence against your company? I'm telling you not to lose it. By dawn, the transfer order had been suspended pending review, but I was not free. A judge would decide whether the broken evidence chain justified conditional release. Daniel proposed Adrian's penthouse as the safest address. I refused before he finished. No Vail property. No Vail security. Adrian's jaw flexed. Claire. Those are my terms. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he nodded once. Daniel has an apartment under his own name. Independent building staff. You choose who enters. It was not generosity. It was discipline. From him, that meant more. Mercer's phone vibrated. He checked the screen and turned it toward me. A live internal query had just searched the department database for one address. My mother's. The cold reached me before the fear did. Adrian read the screen, then looked at me. His voice became very quiet. This was never only about the ledger. My mother's address glowed on Mercer's screen like a lit match. Every instinct in me wanted to call her, warn her, move her somewhere no one could find. Adrian reached for his phone. Don't, I said. His hand stopped. Claire, this is no longer theoretical. Neither is my boundary. Mercer looked between us. Daniel quietly closed the interview room door. Adrian's expression sharpened, but he waited. That mattered. No veil security, I said. If someone inside your system searched for her, sending your people could lead them straight to her. Doing nothing could do the same. Then use Daniel. Independent protection. 2 people, visible, and they report to him. Adrian held my gaze for a long second, then handed Daniel the phone instead of making the call himself. Do exactly that. Relief came mixed with suspicion. He had yielded, but only after I forced the shape of the choice. By 8:30, the judge released me under supervision because the evidence chain had been compromised. My passport was surrendered. My work devices stayed with Mercer. Daniel drove us to an apartment he kept for visiting clients, 6 floors above a bakery that made the hallway smell faintly of cinnamon and hot sugar. Adrian walked the rooms before I entered them, checking locks, windows, sightlines. He did it without touching anything unnecessary. You can leave, I said. I can. He remained by the kitchen counter. But you need access to the building logs, and Daniel can't get them before noon. It was practical. That made it harder to resent. I took off my gray coat and folded it over a chair. One condition. No surveillance inside. No copying anything I open. No decisions about my mother without telling me. Agreed. You answered too quickly. Because I heard you the first time. The words settled between us, not tender, but honest. Daniel brought printed parking records and street camera timestamps. I rebuilt my last hour at Vail Holdings from memory, elevator at 12:48, garage exit at 12:56, traffic camera on Lexington at 1:09. The system claimed my credentials accessed the ledger at 1:42. Adrian watched me line the pages across the table. You remember all of that? I remember schedules because people lie. Time usually doesn't. His eyes shifted to the strip of pale skin where his father's watch had been. For the first time, I wondered what time had taken from him. We logged into a clean terminal Mercer had authorized. The access records showed my token, my permissions, even my usual sequence of commands. Too perfect. I traced the authorization chain backward and found the gap. It wasn't stolen, I said. It was regenerated. Adrian leaned closer, careful not to crowd me. From where? Emergency administrative access. Someone above my level recreated my token and made it look original. His face went still. Then I locked the system now. No, Claire, if you shut it down, they know we found the door. They erase what's behind it. I opened a blank ledger template. We give them something else to find. I built a false path using the same naming pattern as the stolen file, then embedded a silent access marker. Adrian understood before I explained. A decoy. A choice, I corrected. If they open it, they identify themselves. He studied me, then slid the administrator key across the table. You run it. That was the moment my interpretation of him changed, not because he trusted me, but because he accepted a plan he could not control. We activated the file at 10:16. 7 minutes later, the marker triggered. The access came from Victor Hale's office. My breath caught. Adrian's did not. Victor is at a charity breakfast across town, he said. On the screen, someone inside his most trusted advisor's office opened the file again. The cursor blinked beneath Victor Hale's office ID while Adrian stood perfectly still beside me. Someone could be using his terminal, I said. Or his credentials, Adrian replied. He did not defend Victor. He did not accuse him either. That restraint frightened me more than certainty would have. Victor had advised Adrian since he was 19. He had approved budgets, buried scandals, and sat 3 seats from me at every quarterly review. If Adrian moved against him now, there would be no quiet way back. I opened the decoy ledger and compared the access path with the original transfers. The same phrase repeated in the memo field, North Room. These payments aren't random, I said. Look at the dates. Adrian came around the table. I pulled public case records beside the transfers. 3 former employees had withdrawn complaints against Vail subsidiaries within 48 hours of receiving payments through linked firms. 1 had left the state. Another had signed a statement recanting everything. Your father used North Room to relocate people, Adrian said. That's what Victor told you. His eyes lifted to mine. It's what I know. Then explain why the money goes to private investigators, pressure firms, and attorneys who specialize in breaking witnesses. The apartment felt smaller after that. Outside, delivery trucks groaned along the street, ordinary people beginning ordinary days. Mine was gone. Even if Mercer cleared my name, I could never return to my desk and pretend the files were only numbers. Adrian reached for the terminal. We watch Victor. Quietly. And while we watch, we build proof. Someone searched for my mother before sunrise. My voice stayed level, but my nails pressed crescents into my palm. How many other people were searched before they disappeared from these cases? His jaw tightened. You're asking me to dismantle a system before I know who corrupted it. I'm asking you to stop funding it. That landed. For several seconds, only the refrigerator motor hummed. Adrian looked toward the window, then at the administrator key he had placed in my hand. If I freeze North Room, whoever controls it will know. Yes. 2 banks may call their credit lines. 3 council members will distance themselves. Victor's people will start destroying records. Then we preserve what we have first. I turned the screen toward him. But waiting is still a decision. It just protects the person with more power. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had settled. Not peace. Cost. He called Daniel and ordered an emergency audit, external servers, mirrored records, no Vail security involvement. Then he convened a restricted board session by video. I remained off camera, but I heard every voice change when Adrian announced Victor's suspension. Objections came fast. Loyalty. Reputation. Exposure. One man warned that freezing North Room would collapse a financing agreement by noon. Adrian listened without interruption. Freeze it, he said. No speech. No threat. Just consequence. Within 20 minutes, Daniel received notice that a bank had suspended Vail Holdings' credit facility. 2 political allies canceled meetings. Victor sent no message at all. Adrian ended the call and removed his father's watch from his pocket. He set it on the table between us, the steel face catching the pale morning light. The second hand lagged, then jumped. It loses 7 minutes a day, he said. My father never replaced it. He sounded almost embarrassed by the admission. I understood then what his decision had cost beyond money. He had not merely suspended an advisor. He had challenged the last living structure connecting him to the man who raised him. You didn't have enough proof, I said. No, then why do it? His gaze stayed on the watch. Because you were right. Protecting you while leaving the machine intact would only make me selective. The answer changed something between us. Not trust exactly. Something more dangerous, the belief that trust might become possible. I returned to the oldest north room entries before the audit locks engaged. One transaction carried a date 15 years earlier. The night Adrian's father died. My breath caught as I opened the authorization record. Adrian saw my face and came closer. What is it? I turned the screen toward him. The payment had been approved under his credentials. Not Victor's. Not his father's. Adrian Vale, aged 19. He stared at his own name until the room seemed to lose all sound. Then he whispered, I never made that transfer. Adrian kept staring at his name on the authorization record as if it belonged to someone else. I never made that transfer, he repeated. I wanted to believe him. That was the first dangerous thing. The second was realizing I already partly did. I enlarged the signature block and compared it with older approvals. The pattern matched, but the encryption certificate had been issued 11 days after his father's death. It was backdated, I said. Adrian's shoulders lowered by a fraction. Not relief. Permission to breathe. Someone used your credentials after the fact. Victor controlled the family records then. His voice had gone distant. He controlled almost everything. I was 19. The clock over the stove clicked toward noon. Outside, the city moved beneath the windows, unaware that a dead man's paperwork had just shifted the ground under us. What happened that night? I asked. Adrian picked up his father's watch but did not put it on. Victor called me. He said my father had changed locations and needed a message delivered through a secure line. I passed it on. What message? A meeting point. His thumb pressed against the steel casing. My father died there. He had built an empire around that sentence. I could hear it in the way he withheld every unnecessary word. Control had not begun as arrogance. It had begun as punishment. Passing a message isn't the same as ordering a murder, I said. His eyes met mine. It is when the message leads him into the room. Only if you knew. Knowing afterward didn't bring him back. I did not offer absolution. He would have distrusted it, and I would have meant it too quickly. Instead, I reopened the ledger. Then we prove who created the certificate. Adrian watched my hands. You still think proof will be enough? It has to be. And if the person you're protecting disappears before we find it? There it was, the pressure beneath every decision he made. You promised not to force the name from me. I remember. Do you? His expression tightened. Claire, Victor knows you copied something. He searched for your mother. He arranged a transfer. I won't pretend your witness is safe because you want them to be. And I won't hand someone powerless to a system built by the man who destroyed them. Silence stretched between us, edged but honest. Then Adrian crossed to a locked case Daniel had delivered with the old records. He entered a code and placed the contents on the table: audio logs, repair receipts, private correspondence. Everything my father kept outside the company, he said. You have full access. I looked at him. Including anything that implicates you? Especially that. Trust was not warmth. Sometimes it was a weapon placed handle first in someone else's palm. I took it. For the rest of the day, we worked without pretending the distance between us had vanished. I found the certificate trail. Adrian identified old account structures. Together, we proved the transfer bearing his name had been created after his father's death. Near midnight, exhaustion blurred the numbers. I secured my encrypted folder and repeated the boundary before going to the bedroom. No copying. No scanning. No attempt to locate the witness. Adrian stood beside the dark window. I gave you my word. I believed him enough to sleep. That was the third dangerous thing. Morning light woke me through unfamiliar curtains. The apartment was silent. Adrian had left coffee beside the terminal, untouched, as if even kindness required permission now. I sat down and opened my encrypted folder. A security notice filled the screen. External metadata scan completed at 2:14 a.m. My body went cold before my mind caught up. The contents had remained sealed, but someone had mapped the file structure, transmission history, and hidden routing paths, the exact first step needed to trace my witness. Adrian entered from the hallway, jacket over one arm. He saw the message. He did not ask what it meant. "You did this," I said. His silence answered before his mouth did. "I ordered a metadata scan. Not the contents." The room seemed to sharpen around every object he had trusted me with. His father's watch. The private files. The administrator key. All of it suddenly looked less like faith and more like access exchanged for access. "You promised." I was trying to keep them alive. "No. You were trying to make their choice unnecessary." Adrian stepped toward me, then stopped himself. "Claire," I removed his administrator key from the terminal and closed my hand around it. "You don't get to protect people by becoming the reason they need protection." I revoked his access to the decoy ledger, disabled every shared credential, and watched his name disappear from the permissions list. He could still own buildings, companies, and half the city's silence. But he no longer had mine. "From this moment on," I said, "you know only what I choose to tell you." I did not wait for Adrian to answer. I packed my coat, the watch, and the encrypted drive while he stood beside the terminal with his hands open at his sides. Not reaching. Not ordering. Too late, he had finally learned restraint. "Mercer can arrange formal protection," I said. "Outside your network." Adrian's face looked carved from exhaustion. "Mercer's department is compromised. So is yours." The words hurt because they were true, not because they were cruel. I called Mercer myself. Adrian could have stopped the call, shut down the building, made every elevator refuse to move. Instead, he stepped away from the door. That was the consequence of his promise. Once broken, even obedience looked like guilt. Mercer arrived 40 minutes later with protective custody paperwork and a plain government sedan waiting downstairs. Before I left, Adrian held out his father's watch. "Keep it with the files." I closed my fingers around the cold steel. "I'm not keeping it for you." "I know." In the elevator mirror, I watched him disappear as the doors closed. He did not follow. By noon, Victor's answer arrived without his name attached. News alerts filled Mercer's phone. Internal Veil Ledger links CEO and Secretary to witness payments. My photograph sat beside Adrian's, cropped from a charity event where I had been holding his schedule. The article called me his gatekeeper. His accomplice. The woman who converted his orders into clean paperwork. My ordinary life did not merely feel unreachable. It had been rewritten in public by someone who understood exactly how invisible work could be made to look like secret power. Mercer drove me to a protected interview suite beneath the federal courthouse. Gray walls. No windows. One bolted table. Safety without comfort. Daniel called through Mercer's secure line. Veil Holdings accounts were being frozen. 2 board members had resigned. Prosecutors had offered Adrian a path to separate himself from the forged ledger if he identified me as the architect of Northroom. "What did he say?" I asked. Daniel's pause told me the price before the answer. He refused. I sat very still. Adrian had finally chosen not to control the story, and it was destroying him. That did not restore my trust. It only made the fracture harder to survive. My phone vibrated inside an evidence pouch. Adrian's name appeared once, then again. I declined both calls. Staying connected risked my witness. Cutting him off left him alone inside a lie partly built from my silence. There was no clean choice anymore. I revoked the last shared recovery key, then sent Mercer the sealed instructions needed to relocate the witness without revealing the destination to me. Even I could no longer lead anyone there. The decision protected the truth and removed my ability to reach the one person who could clear us. Near midnight, Mercer brought me the audio archive from Adrian's family files. I listened through cheap headphones while the ventilation system breathed cold air across the room. Victor's voice. Adrian's at 19. A station announcement buried beneath static. I replayed it, then looked at the watch in my palm. 7 minutes slow. The same delay Adrian had mentioned. I aligned the recorded announcement with the city transit log. The timestamp on the file could not be right. More than that, the conversation had been cut. 2 sections had been reversed, making Adrian's response sound like an instruction instead of a question. My pulse began to pound. The evidence that had condemned him for 15 years had been arranged to make him believe his worst fear. I replayed Victor's first sentence. This time, I heard the hidden hesitation before Adrian answered. Adrian had not sent his father into the trap. Someone had made him think he had. I played the recording 6 more times before I trusted what I heard. Victor had called Adrian first. He had supplied the changed meeting point, waited for Adrian to repeat it as a question, then cut and reversed the audio until the question sounded like an order. The 7-minute delay in the station announcement matched the watch in my hand. The backdated certificate matched the false transfer. The same authentication trail connected the token created in my name, the fraudulent transfer request, and the access to the decoy ledger from Victor's office. The clues were not separate anymore. They were one design, stretched across 15 years. Victor had built North Room into a machine for controlling witnesses, then taught Adrian to believe control was the only thing keeping people alive. I gave Mercer the corrected timeline. He verified the transit log and arranged a recorded meeting before dawn. Adrian entered the interview room without his coat. Without security. Without the authority that had once seemed attached to his body. He saw the watch on the table and understood before I spoke. The file was altered, I said. You didn't send your father into that room. Victor made you carry the message, then made you believe you had chosen it. Adrian sat slowly. His hands remained flat on the table. And the scan? That was your choice. His eyes closed once. Yes. No defense. No attempt to trade one innocence for another. I told myself I was protecting the witness, he said. I was protecting myself from not knowing. The apology hurt more because it was accurate. He slid a sealed envelope toward me. Inside were the master code to the original ledger, a signed statement accepting responsibility for North Room under his leadership, and authorization giving me complete control over publication. You can release everything, he said. Even if it destroys Vale Holdings? Especially then. He did not ask me to stay. He did not ask me to forgive him. That was how I knew the lesson had finally reached the wound beneath his power. I opened the ledger on Mercer's isolated terminal. The original records proved Victor had moved money through shell firms, paid the police administrator, backdated Adrian's credentials, and targeted the witness I had hidden. But evidence was not the same as proof of control. Victor could claim the files were fabricated. The decoy ledger offered the only path left. I had embedded a false transaction that pointed directly to his private authentication key. If we released the real ledger, Victor would have minutes to erase the decoy before investigators mirrored his backup server. To stop him, I would have to identify myself publicly as the person who copied and seeded the data. Adrian could lose his company. I could lose my freedom. Say you ordered me, I told him. It would protect me. It would be another lie. I looked at him across the table. Then we tell the truth separately. He nodded. No command. No rescue. Just consent. I activated the publication sequence but stopped before the final confirmation. Adrian watched my hand hover above the key. After this, I said, you may never be able to open another door for me. His voice was quiet. Then this time, I'll walk into the room with you. I pressed confirm. The confirmation bar filled in silence. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the original ledger appeared on every authorized screen in the room, each transaction mirrored to Mercer's evidence server and the independent archive Adrian had created when he froze North Room. My name sat beside the data copy. Adrian sat beside the master authorization. Neither of us had hidden. A red warning flashed. Someone had entered the decoy ledger. Victor, I said. The authentication key matched the private certificate we had traced through the false transfer, the police payment, and the order that had nearly moved me before dawn. He was not reading the file. He was deleting the transaction I had invented, the one only the architect of North Room would recognize as dangerous. I released the final lock. His deletion request became a signed confession written in machine language. Mercer watched the trace resolve across the screen. Backup server. Private terminal. Same key. Adrian's hand tightened once against the table, then relaxed. He did not reach for a phone. He did not summon men or issue punishment. He simply moved his signed statement closer to Mercer. Use that too. By the time investigators reached Victor, he was attempting to leave the city with the backup drive that completed the chain. No chase. No blood. Just the quiet collapse of a man who had spent years believing everyone else would protect themselves before they protected the truth. The witness I had hidden appeared through a secured video connection and confirmed what North Room had done: threats disguised as settlements, ruined careers disguised as voluntary withdrawals, silence purchased with fear. Because I had preserved the records and forced the real administrator to identify himself, the conspiracy charge against me disappeared. I still admitted copying the ledger. I accepted review of that decision without pretending desperation made every method clean. Adrian did the same. Vale Holdings was placed under independent control. He resigned before anyone could demand it. When a board attorney suggested blaming my access for the entire breach, Adrian stood, removed his signature authority from the company, and handed it to the investigator without looking at me for approval. That was how I knew he had changed. Not because he said he trusted me. Because he stopped using sacrifice as another way to decide for me. Outside the hearing room, morning had turned the courthouse windows pale gold. Adrian gave me my employment contract, already terminated without penalty, and every personal file the company held on me. "You owe me nothing," he said. I placed his father's watch in his palm. The second hand still moved 7 minutes behind. "Have it repaired." He looked down at it. I thought keeping it broken meant remembering. Maybe remembering isn't the same as remaining wounded. He closed his fingers around the steel, then stepped aside, leaving the exit clear. No command. No guard waiting. No expectation. I could have walked away. For most of my life, I would have. Instead, I stopped beside him. At 3 a.m, I didn't call because you could open the jail, I said. I called because the system belonged to you, and I needed to know whether you would choose to change it. And now? Now I need the truth. No surveillance. No decisions made for me. He nodded once. Then that is what you'll have. We walked out together, equal in consequence if not in history. He had ruled the city by making people obey. I had changed him by refusing to disappear.